Quick post-production heads up. This video turned longer than I planned, so I've added plenty of extra timestamps. The full transcript with AI prompts and outputs, resumes, job postings, sources, everything's in the video description below, so you can jump to the part of the video that's interesting to you. And I will improve the pacing in future videos. Also, right before filming, I was playing with my dog Stroopwafel. A little of her fur made it onto my shirt. She's making a surprise cameo at the start and at the end of the video. Consider this her YouTube debut. All right, on to the video. Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel. In this video, we will explore a few practical ways AI can help us prepare our resume for a job application, or the way that AI can help us examine our resume and compare it to a more aspirational job, help us identify opportunities for professional development so that we can reach those positions that we might be targeting a few years from now. To facilitate in this, I have created a fake resume, which we will compare to 3 actual job postings. One for which the candidate is very well qualified, one which is a bit of a transition to a different sector or different industry, and then one job post that's more aspirational, something that the candidate might target for, 5, 6, 10 years down the road. What we will not do today, though, is use AI to generate resumes from scratch. Now, can AI do this? Absolutely. I mean, you can just hit record in your favorite chatbot and just talk to it about your past professional experience, your education, your skills, and ask it to create a resume. And there are some AI tools that are advertised specifically for this purpose. But I think there's value in reflecting on our professional journey and writing it down on our own, opening up a template in Word and just structuring that resume so that it comes out in your own voice. And that is also really important because recruiters are starting to push back. Some are noting that AI generated resumes all kind of look and sound the same. They don't stand out. The authentic voice is lost. They are often full of jargon and seem overfitted to job applications, which is sometimes a red flag. So I will assume in this video that you already have a resume on hand. And what you're trying to do is tailor that resume or maybe edit that resume to be better fitted to a particular job that you're looking for, or that you're taking your resume, looking at a more aspirational role in the future and determining what is the professional development, the skills, the education, the certifications that you might want to build up over time to be able to apply for those more aspirational jobs in the future. So let's jump to the lab and have a look how AI can help us. Today, we will be using Google's Gemini, but you can do this with any AI chatbot that you prefer. I am using Google's Gemini Pro, but again, you can use any version of the software, including the free versions for this basic analysis. All right, we're going to start off by giving the AI a bit of context, telling what we'll be doing today. And we will start by uploading Maria's resume and asking it just for a high-level overview. 1, to give us a summary, but 2, to also make sure that AI is able to read her resume correctly. All right, so up here is the full prompt. So we said we need some assistance analyzing her resume, and we want to have a summary of her experiences and some highlights. So here we go. Here are some highlights from sales and revenue growth, some leadership experience, and some experience with process and strategy. It's a pretty good summary of her resume. So now we know that it could read it. That's the first part. Now we're going to compare this resume to jobs, and let's see what recommendations and advice Gemini will give us to tailor this particular resume to the jobs. Now, the first one, I think Maria is qualified for. This is an account executive event sales at UMA. I think she meets all of these requirements. Now, what I'm going to do before we actually ask AI to do any analysis, I will copy the URL link for this job. And first, let's make sure that AI can actually access this. This is an important thing to check because some websites are a little bit more difficult or impossible for AI to check. And sometimes they're actually designed that way because they don't want to be scrubbed. So first, let's see if Gemini can actually access this. And we are simply going to ask it. So there you go. Very direct, straightforward question. Let's make sure it can access this. It cannot access it. Now, I knew this was going to happen because I tested it, but this often happens with job postings. My advice is if you're going to do this kind of analysis, find a job post that you like this, and then simply print and save it as a PDF. I've done this for all of the jobs today. And then instead of relying on AI to try to access this web page, you can simply share the PDF of the job application. So let's do that and help Gemini out. All right. So now Gemini should have everything, Maria's resume and the job posting from Uma as a PDF. So here we go. We've got an analysis. Now, overall, it says that Maria Alvarez appears to be a very strong candidate for this role. That's great. We expected this to happen. It's highlighted strong areas of alignment. That's great. We know that she has a lot of the requirements, both in terms of experience and familiarity with the type of software that they're looking for. But there are some potential points to consider. Role seniority, right? This is an individual contributor role focused on personal sales successes. And Maria is currently a team lead, managing a team of 8. So this could be a bit of a shift from management back to sales, which is true, but perhaps Maria's interested in this. Um, and so we might want to align this a little bit more precisely because somebody might ask, hey, you already have a management role. Why do you want to go back to this type of individual sales role? So let's see how AI can help us do this. All right, so let's see what recommendations Gemini has for dealing with this point to consider, this idea of role seniority, and that somebody might ask, why is she going back from a management role? So here are some recommendations for Maria's resume. So we might want to revise the professional summary. This is what's at the very top of her resume. And we might want to change it, right? That moving from the seeking strategic sales leadership role to maybe results driven professional, somebody who's looking more to grow a company. Again, small edit, but it might make a difference. Um, and then, of course, it says, think about how you phrase this team lead experience section, right? That maybe here we want to highlight what she did as an individual. So, what her direct contributions were, for example. So, some pretty good recommendations here. And maybe there are different things that should be highlighted. These perhaps might be things that Maria might want to keep in mind for an interview or perhaps for a cover letter. Some other questions that you may consider asking AI in these type of situations is, for example, keywords. You might ask, what keywords from the job posting are missing from this resume? This is something that could help tailor the resume for ATS. These are application tracking systems that recruiters sometimes use. Or we could ask a skill matching question. So, which hard or soft skills does this resume clearly demonstrate, and which ones need more emphasis based on the job description, for example? We could also ask about achievements or responsibilities, right? Does this resume focus enough on the accomplishments rather than just the responsibilities, which is perhaps what this feedback is getting at? So we could try it with this one. Let's try the first question around a keyword. So let's ask what keywords from the job posting are missing from this resume? And this might give Maria some ideas on the kind of language to include, because we know that some organizations have very specific types of language and vocabulary. And perhaps in some industries, you really want to include that in your resume. So here are the recommendations that it gave for Maria so that she could pass through and, some kind of an automated screening system or an application tracking system, right? So for example, the job description emphasizes specific types of sales personality, right? Hunter, prospecting, driven, resilient. Interesting words, right? And so these are the kind of words that maybe Maria would want to work into her resume to really stand out and that might be more likely to be caught by an automated system. So I think it's some good advice. We could also ask the same question about skills. So we could ask AI. So in this case, we want to know which hard and soft skill does this resume clearly show, and which ones could use more emphasis based on this job description. So once again, we have a pretty good analysis. While Maria is a good fit for this job, right? Here are the hard and soft skills that her resume clearly demonstrates. And here is ones that Gemini recommends should be a little bit more highlighted with some recommendations on the language. So I think this is some solid advice. Now, this is maybe a little bit easy case because this is a job for which I know Maria's resume is almost tailored for. But what if Maria is interested in applying for a job that's outside of her industry, outside of her area of expertise? Here we're going to go to our second job, and this is with Hilton as a senior sales manager for Hilton Austin. So there's a job description, something about their position statement, position summary, their expectations with customer engagement, prospecting, negotiations. And the one thing that I think Maria's resume doesn't have here is this 2 years of hotel group sales management experience and experience selling in a 400 plus room hotel. Now, Maria does have a little bit of experience in hospitality. Her family owns an Airbnb, that's something we put in the resume. So she has a little bit of experience with this, but that's different than managing a hotel with 400 people. So let's see what kind of advice Gemini will give us here when we're thinking about a job that's a little bit of a stretch. So here we go. So once again, I know that Gemini will be unable to access the web page, so I have a PDF of this Hilton job posting. Let's see what it suggests. So we have an analysis of Maria's fit for this role. This time, you'll notice that in the very top summary, Gemini immediately points out that Maria possesses many of the core sales and leadership skills for this role, but her candidacy could face a significant challenge due to her lack of direct hotel industry experience, which is exactly what we expected. So let's see what recommendations we have here. We have our areas of alignment, just like before. She has some seniority, she has some strategic experience. She's done well in sales. She has the technical skills. She's familiar with at least one of the software tools that is often used in hospitality. And the position is in Austin, where she's also located. So, that may help. But areas to address, so these are gaps: industry experience and group sales experience. So she is not working in the hotel industry. She has B2B sales experience, but not within a group sales, right? So selling things to groups like in convention centers, right? So conclusion is that she has some of the skills, but she lacks others. Now let's go back and ask how we could modify this resume to be a little bit better tailored. In other words, to highlight these strengths and perhaps minimize some of these gaps. All right, so here's what we'll ask Gemini to do. We're going to pack a few things into this prompt. One, we'll ask for some keywords from the job posting that she could include in her resume and how she could better highlight her areas of strong alignment with the job posting. And we're also asking how she could highlight what skills she could highlight in her resume to increase her chances for an interview, right? Now, AI also knows that our goal here is to try to tailor this resume in a way to land an interview at Hilton for this particular role. So here is the quick analysis and recommendations. First of all, let's have a look at the missing keywords from the job posting. There are a number that are probably going to be difficult, right? Hotel group sales, conventions. These are things that she does not have in her experience. Um, but certainly she could perhaps highlight her role helping her family. So here are a couple of examples that Gemini recommends. So to better align with the job description and any kind of ATS systems, Maria's resume would benefit from the following terms. All right. So here's a couple that it recommends. Now, some of this she might not be able to fit in. She probably doesn't have experience planning large convention events or hotel group sales. But some of these others might be possible. So, how to better align? So, she could make her experience stand out by reframing her existing accomplishments to mirror the language. So, here are some recommendations, right? Her most relevant experience is at bulk wine distributors. I totally made that up. The Hilton job is focused on sales to groups. So, perhaps she did group sales in that role, right? Selling to hospitality clients. So, that's something she might highlight. Um, this B2B experience that could perhaps be reframed as group sales if that is what she did. And here's some recommendations for changing the language for those bullet points. And also for strategic planning, right? Think about business strategy. So she could think about these, her outreach campaigns that she used to develop these to reach these new clients. So there are things that she could clearly do. And because she's experienced with some of the software that's used, this is something else perhaps that she could highlight. What AI is getting at here is trying to identify transferable skills. And we could actually very directly ask that. What are the skills for this candidate, so from Maria's background, that are transferable and how they could be reframed? This is essentially what Gemini is doing, but we can ask that very explicitly to see what it recommends. And I think that's a good question to ask when you are doing transitions from one sector or from one industry to another. So we'll ask AI to really think about the transferability of skills and how Maria's experience can be reframed. And we'll see what kind of specific recommendations it gives us. So here are a few recommendations from Gemini. This is essentially building on what it gave us above, but this focus on transferability, I think, is potentially useful here. Um, and so here's the current language that's used from resume. And here's an example of how she could reframe her bulk wine sales experience. And also example of the kind of language she could use. The same for strategic analysis. I think this gives some interesting insights that Maria might be able to use as she's thinking about how to reframe her resume. Now, for a job like this, which is a little bit of a stretch, we also know that the cover letter is going to be very important. And so we could ask Gemini for some help in thinking about the types of topics that could be covered in a cover letter to help get the point across that she does not have the exact skills as outlined in the applications, but she does have transferable skills that could be valuable for somebody in this position. So let's ask Gemini to help us think about the cover letter. All right, so here's the prompt. We're asking Gemini now to really think about how it could use the material in the resume and the job application or the job posting to come up with some specific bullet points, things that could be addressed in the cover letter, and to also give examples. And I asked it to provide examples because I wanted to see the kind of language it would recommend that Maria use. So here we go. Here's a few bullet points. Directly address the industry transition. That's a very valid point. She's transitioning to a completely new industry. And so it might be interested to highlight this. For example, I like this introduction, right? Acknowledging that she grew up assisting with a family business and bed and breakfast. So that might demonstrate why she's interested in this industry, that maybe there's a family connection there. It suggests translating B2B accomplishments into group sales. Here's some language showcasing day one readiness with technology. That's an example, right? She knows how to use technology. So her training, her onboarding might be simpler or easier to accomplish. And of course, her strategic experience, right? What does she want to do? In her resume, she says she's looking for leadership roles. And this is one way that she might be able to transition. So I think these are interesting ideas, great things to consider. So if you are doing this type of work with an AI, You're comparing your resume to a job posting. Don't forget about the cover letter and think about how you could incorporate this type of analysis into your cover letter to help address any type of gaps or any transitions that you're making and how your skills are transferable. And for the third case, let's look for a job that's more aspirational. Imagine Maria's targeting more senior strategy roles. This is where she wants to get at. And she found a job which she thinks she might want to have 5 or 10 years from now. So she's not quite ready yet, but she wants to work her way to that type of position. In this case, we're going to take a job from Google. This is a sales and strategy operations manager. Now, she does not have the minimum qualifications. It requires at least 8 years of experience in management consulting, sales, strategy, etc., or 6 plus an advanced degree, 4 years of working with executive stakeholders, and perhaps some technical skills that she might not have. So the question is, what should Maria do now if in 5 or 10 years she wants this type of a role? What are the gaps that she has in her current resume, in her current experience, and how can she build on those to be a good candidate for a job like this in the future? We are going to go back to Gemini and we are going to ask it once again to start by analyzing and comparing her resume to the job posting. Once again, I have the PDF of this job. So let's see what AI says about Maria's fit for this role at Google. All right, so let's see what AI recommends here. In this case, it says that Google's position is highly technical and data centric rather than direct sales. So there are several significant gaps. So we know that this is more of an aspirational roles. So areas of misalignment, technical skills, years of experience, and role focus. Potential alignment, as she is in Austin, so perhaps that means no relocation fees. She does have some team leader experience already, and she does have at least the minimum degree requirement. But due to substantial gaps in requirements, right, this is going to be a very challenging application for Maria. So let's start thinking about how we could use Gemini here to help Maria align her goals. Let's start with something simple and do a gap analysis. Gemini's already told us there's gaps. So let's ask for some specific gaps that Gemini can identify. So here we'll let AI break down what this aspirational job requires and where Maria is at this point in time. So here is a little bit more detail on the gaps. One is technical data skills. So Maria would have to do some training, right, to get her SQL skills up to date. Years of professional experience. So if this is aspirational, now she knows, all right, she's got a few more years of leadership experience to build up. The type of leadership experience as well. So maybe more on data, more analytics, something like that. And certainly some data engineering skills. So now we know what some of the gaps are. Now we could ask, well, how could Maria bridge these gaps? Perhaps there are skills, certifications that she could work on. All right, so let's see what Gemini recommends, and let's also see what type of links it provides. In other words, we want to see the specific type of certifications, degrees, or tools that it recommends that Maria build proficiency with. So here is a learning path. I think it's great that it gave us the kind of the immediate and long-term plans. So so the immediate priority, so things she could work immediately could be working on Google Data Analytics Professional Certificate. This is something she could probably do on the side with her job, or a Microsoft certificate around data analytics. These are things that she could probably do as she is working in her current roles or other roles. And here are the links directly to these certifications. There are also advanced degrees. So this would be a more long-term role, a much longer commitment. But the recommendations are either a Master of Science in Business Analytics or an MBA. Here are two that are recommended at the McCombs Business School. And of course, some technical training. And again, with a link to the certification. And again, you'll see that in each one of these cases, AI is trying to explain why it helps. So it's trying to say, how do we bridge the gap between the resume and the application? So I think this is a pretty good starting point. I might give her some great advice. But training and certifications is just part of the journey. The other part is stepping stone. From her current job, she might not be able to immediately leap to a sales and strategy operations role in Google. So another question we might ask is what are the type of roles she might pursue to help build up the professional experience on her resume over time? Let's see what Gemini will recommend for the types of roles that Maria should pursue over the next few years so that she is better suited for this job at Google. Let's see what Gemini is recommending here. Let's see, we've got a sales operation analyst role, right? Why it's a good fit. Pretty good explanation. This is where she might learn some of these skills like SQL, right? That's something the Google role required. So she could look for some of those roles. A job at a mid-sized tech company, that's interesting. It would give her the experience of working in a larger tech company and build up that resume as well. So I think these are two good recommendations for the types of roles that she might want to pursue. And this might narrow things down a little bit more for Maria as she's thinking about what her career trajectory could look like, what the next steps could look like. And one other thing that you might consider asking here is what about networking, right? We know that the people we know are equally as important. So perhaps Maria would also want to know the kinds of people she should network and what are the events she should go to build those types of networks. So let's see what Gemini recommends in that respect. Let's see how Gemini recommends Maria build these networks and the types of communities that she should network with to bolster her chances to eventually transition into a career at Google. All right, let's see what Gemini recommends. I see it's recognized that Austin is a tech hub, so maybe there's a good opportunity to do that in Austin. So here's some recommendations for some communities where she could network and example action. She could follow through leaders in sales ops space and engage with their content. So you could do that in LinkedIn and start engaging and communicating with them. Here's the recommendations for a number of organizations in Austin that she could network with. I think these are pretty decent examples. It didn't mention LinkedIn up here. And so one of the things I wonder is could Maria also start setting herself up by posting certain types of articles or LinkedIn, certain commentaries on LinkedIn? So could she also help build herself up as a authority in this field? Maybe, and that's again something that she could ask Gemini for help with. Let's see what recommendations Gemini has around LinkedIn or her personal webpage and how Maria could set herself up as a thought leader in the space. This might be a bit of a stretch because, again, Maria does not have the expertise in this space yet. But let's see what kind of recommendations Gemini does come up with. Well, I think he did a pretty decent set of recommendations here. So one would be, for example, to revise her headline. So that's also what's on the top of her resume. She might think about rephrasing things. So this goes back to what Gemini recommended doing earlier in terms of how do you rethink your roles and rephrase them in ways that might make sense. Create a project portfolio. That might be an interesting thing, right? So if she's doing things on the side, if she's doing these certificates, you should actually highlight certificates and to highlight herself as a thought leader. Yeah, she could certainly write context showcasing her journey, how she's growing over time, and start linking to what she's doing now to data analytics, to SQL, to the type of data intelligence work that that type of a Google role might require. I think Gemini did a pretty good job here of helping Maria, either recognizing a job application for which she is well suited, helping her rephrase or restructure her resume for a job that might be a bit of a stretch, and then helping her think about the way that she could reach a more aspirational role in the future. I hope these gave you some inspiration on how you can use AI to help you tailor your resume or think about your professional experience and where you want to go in the future. So, how AI can help you with your journey. Now, at this point, I want to raise one more point. If we are using AI to fine tune our resumes, are companies using AI to sift through those resumes, rank them, make hiring decisions, promotion decisions, even termination decisions? Absolutely. There are plenty of examples of companies using AI to assist in recruiting. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad thing because popular jobs can have hundreds or thousands of applications. It's unrealistic to believe that a human will actually read through that many resumes and be able to weigh them all against each other accordingly. So, in the past, in those kind of popular roles, many resumes were not even seen. With AI, at least there's the higher likelihood that every resume in the stack was considered. But companies can sometimes take this to the extreme. You can imagine a world where a company uses AI to create a job posting, using AI to rank all the applications against that job posting. And then with AI agents, you could potentially even outsource the negotiation piece. So discussions about salary or benefits could simply be a back and forth between an individual and AI. And in today's world, it's possible that you may never know that you're even negotiating with an AI. And the company is simply told at the end, well, out of the 200 resumes I got, here are the top three, and here is the negotiation results for the first or my top candidate. But we can also imagine a world where companies are using AI a little bit more carefully. Perhaps they're using AI to do an initial sort of resumes, but then humans look through and rank them. Or perhaps they use AI to help verify certain things in a resume. But then the final decision and negotiations are handled by humans. Both of these scenarios are possible, as is anything in between. The question is, should we encourage organizations to do this? That's a somewhat different question, and one that I don't think we're talking about enough. For example, how comfortable would you be knowing that a job that you applied for was ranked, analyzed, and prioritized completely by AI? Perhaps even the initial communication you had around salaries before you negotiated with someone or before a final interview, that all of that was handled by AI. How would you feel if your promotion was determined by AI? Or if you know that your job or your department was terminated because of a decision by artificial intelligence? So, how much and where should humans be injected in that loop is a fair question to ask, and one that I think we will need to discuss in a lot more detail. And as a society, we will have to decide what we are comfortable with. To what extent are we willing to outsource those kind of decisions to AI? And to what extent we really want them to stay with humans. If you enjoyed this content, consider giving the video a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.